Well, we've gotten a local opinion. Let's cross abroad now, where we get more on Jill Marcus's surprise decision to end her reign as Reserve Bank Governor. I'm joined in London by Peter Todd Montalto. He's an emerging markets economist at Nomura International. Peter, good to have you with us. Are you taken aback and just as surprised as we are that we had such a phenomenal Reserve Bank governor and now decided to step down?
Well, it's a very sad day. I think we should start by saying that. I mean, Jill Marcus has accomplished an awful lot in her term as governor. She professionalised an institution to a very large degree. She's taken the statements to be far more detailed and complex, analysing all different risk elements that are out there, and a much more international focus as well as being more open to talking to civil society, to being more engaging with analysts, certainly, than Tito was before. So it's definitely a sad day on that front, but not a total surprise, I have to say. I mean, we expected her initially to be renewed maybe for a year or two to see through the Fed hikes, but in recent months it's become increasingly obvious, talking to people within the ANC, that there were some issues going on around the hiking cycle, around race issues of senior leadership of the economy as well, and also her own reasons for standing down. She said ultimately she didn't, she requested that Jacob Zuma not renew her term. So yeah, it's not a total surprise, but the way it was done today I thought was quite classy in the way she decided to go.
When you speak to your counterparts from an international perspective, are any of them expressing a lack of confidence in South Africa at the moment?
Well, I mean, seeing a new governor come through, it's most likely to be either Lesetja Kganyago or maybe Daniel Mminele. If Lesetja is the front runner, or Daniel, I mean, there's going to be policy continuity. There's no reason to see that SARB credibility would be questioned. There would be business as usual, very much. So I think markets on that front are not particularly worried. I mean, if Jacob Zuma decides to appoint an outsider, I think there would be more concern. I've tried to go through basically all the possible people that it could be out from outside the SARB, and it'd be very hard to find someone who could fill her shoes, certainly from outside the bank. So assuming it's someone inside the bank, I think the markets will not be particularly worried.
Let's turn on to someone else, and from a leadership perspective here in South Africa that you've been keeping your eye on, Baleka Mbete. She's a spokesperson at Parliament, but there's been a lot of news about her as well as the tensions developing between opposing parties like the EFF as well as the DA. Your analysis of the situation from afar, Peter?
Well, it's two strikingly different institutions, the SARB, which is seen as very credible and independent, and the Parliament, which as an institution should be independent and the voice of the people to hold the executive to account. I mean, for a long time, since '94, investors have never really worried about the Parliament as an institution. I mean, there have been scandals within it, certainly, but it's only very recently, in the last, since the election really, I think that investors have started asking me more questions about what is going on within the Parliament. People are somewhat perplexed how such a political role of chair of the ANC can be an independent guardian of the institution of Parliament, and we'll have to see how it plays out. I mean, the EFF certainly haven't behaved perfectly in the situation, but it's quite obvious to see their frustrations at the same time. So I think that South Africa needs to sort of smell the coffee on this issue and realise that actually Parliament is a very serious institution that should not be dragged down into the mire of political wrangling.
Certainly hope your words did not fall on deaf ears. But if we turn our attention to the UK, where the Scottish independence referendum has no doubt been hogging the headlines and impacting on currencies, your analysis of that situation and how it's developed over the years?
Well, it's basically come as quite a shock to markets, really. Everyone kind of ignored the issue till about 2 weeks ago when we had the first of the very tight opinion polls come out that basically showing it was 50-50. I think it's a very tough call. The opinion polls probably aren't that reliable. We'll get the result in the early hours of tomorrow morning. I think it will be a marginal no vote given the very difficult sort of birthing period of a new state that Scotland would have, unable to join the EU for maybe 5, even 10 years, unable to join NATO as well, and also the issues around the currency, around financial stability at the same time. So I think maybe marginally a no vote, but it's going to be a very close call, and regardless of the outcome, there's going to be very serious shifts in the constitutional makeup of the United Kingdom on either side, which are not necessarily that positive for the UK in the long run.
Maybe if you can walk us through some of those, the lack of policy, currency implications, and more importantly, what it means for the Scottish economy should the worst case scenario happen where we get a yes vote.
Well, I think there would be no problem structurally or economically in having a proper currency union where you learn the mistakes from the Eurozone, you have very tight fiscal targets for the Scottish economy, but that's quite clearly totally incompatible with what the SNP want for Scotland, with the higher level of deficit that they run at the moment, given the higher funding they get given by Westminster. I don't think the ANC, sorry, not the ANC, I think the SNP would accept that solution, and using the currency on their own without the backstop of the Bank of England, I think would cause massive capital flight, massive uncertainty in the economy, which would ultimately harm potential growth there and the ability for banks to support investment and things like that. It's going to be a very difficult path as well to set up their own currency, but probably that is the most sustainable solution in the long run, I would suggest. If they do go down the route of trying to use the pound without the backing of the Central Bank of England, then I think they would ultimately end up having to use their own currency in a few years' time anyway.